Hey heroes, and welcome to another uncanny episode of History of the Marvel Universe. This channel is sponsored in part by Patreon supporters. If you would like to vote in monthly polls that help decide what topics get covered on the channel, then you can sign up for an amount of your choosing over at patreon.com/MaryMarvelite. The link is in the description below along with other places you can find me. This week we're turning our attention to a timeline that we've mentioned on the channel before, the Age of Apocalypse. You may recall from previous videos that this reality was inadvertently created by David Haller, aka Legion, the powerful mutant son of Professor Xavier. Believing that his father's ongoing feud with Magneto had prevented them from being a family, David traveled back in time to before he was born, shortly after Xavier and Magnus first met in Israel. He intended on assassinating Magneto before their falling out, however he unintentionally brought 4 X-Men back in time with him: Iceman, Psylocke, Storm, and Bishop. They attempted to stop him from altering the timeline, however the ensuing battle was widely televised, causing the general public to learn of the existence of superhuman mutants about a decade earlier than they otherwise should have. This, in turn, caused the ancient mutant Apocalypse to begin accelerating his plans for conquest and global conflict. Furthermore, when Legion attempted to deliver a killing blow to Magneto, Xavier intervened, sacrificing his own life to save his friend. Having accidentally prevented his own birth, Legion disappeared, as did the X-Men who followed him, with the exception of Bishop, who was originally from another timeline entirely, although his mind was damaged by the temporal energies, rendering him amnesiac. In this new, altered reality, the early life and upbringing of Hank McCoy was largely the same as his Earth 616 counterpart. He was born with a mutant X gene that endowed him with superhuman agility and strength, and because his father was exposed to nuclear radiation prior to his conception, the physical aspects of Hank's mutation were present from birth, including noticeably large and dexterous hands and feet. Of course, in this timeline, Hank McCoy never met Charles Xavier and was never recruited into the X-Men. Highly intelligent, McCoy completed his education, earning a PhD in biochemistry, while Apocalypse gathered followers and violently overthrew the United States, seizing control over much of North America. Magneto, meanwhile, assembled his own team of X-Men, named in honor of his fallen comrade, but they were unable to stop Apocalypse's takeover and were forced to go into hiding and rely on guerrilla tactics. Amidst this new world order, Dr. Hank McCoy was recruited by Apocalypse and mentored by the twisted superhuman geneticist Mr. Sinister. Together, Sinister and McCoy experimented on captive mutants who were deemed unfit to survive, amplifying their abilities and transforming them into a superhuman army for Apocalypse called the Infinites. Using what he learned, he also experimented on himself, enhancing his own mutation and transforming into an increasingly sadistic, gray, furry form that his prisoners appropriately dubbed the Dark Beast. When Apocalypse's son, Nemesis, was grievously injured in a battle with Magneto, the Dark Beast was the one who revived him, encasing his damaged nuclear body in an armored containment suit, transforming him into the being known as Holocaust. Another person he enhanced was a massive, ferocious killer with heightened senses known only as Wolverine. Although it's important to note that this Age of Apocalypse Wolverine seems to be unrelated to the X-Man of the same name who also existed in this timeline, but still went by Weapon X. Either way, despite earning respect from Holocaust, who once claimed that he was the best killer on Earth, this Wolverine was ultimately defeated and seemingly killed by the mutant Gambit. The Dark Beast and Mr. Sinister also genetically altered Jamie Madrox, the Multiple Man, bypassing his duplication ability's natural limits to create an apocalypse-worshipping cult called the Madri, while leaving the original Madrox completely enfeebled. The whole Age of Apocalypse situation started coming to a head when Magneto and the X-Men found Bishop and learned that the timeline had been altered. Hoping to restore the world to a more favorable state, Magneto sent Gambit and his team, the X-Ternals, to retrieve a fragment of the M-Chron crystal, an alien artifact containing a nexus of realities. Using the crystal fragment to unlock her latent temporal powers, Illyana Rasputin sent Bishop back in time yet again so that he could prevent Legion from accidentally killing Xavier and in turn prevent the Age of Apocalypse from coming to pass in the first place. Miraculously, this whole scheme actually worked, as the X-Men who followed Legion into the past were sent back to their own time, and reality righted itself as the proper 616 timeline was restored. The Age of Apocalypse ultimately persisted as a divergent timeline, Earth 295, but Magneto did succeed in slaying Apocalypse himself, giving this timeline a new lease on life. In the midst of all this upheaval and time-altering chaos, the Dark Beast sought to escape into the multiverse by teleporting into the M-Chron crystal itself. Quicksilver attempted to intervene, but the Dark Beast nonetheless got away. The end result is that the Dark Beast emerged roughly 20 years in the past on Earth 616, the Prime Marvel Universe. Initially disheveled and partially amnesiac, he attempted to continue his scientific experimentation despite his reduced mental faculties. Eventually, he encountered a young Emma Frost, rescuing her from a group of attacking men, and she agreed to use her psychic powers to restore his mind in exchange for protection, although it seems as though their partnership was short-lived. Back to his sadistic self, the Dark Beast performed further genetic testing on humans and mutants alike, resulting in the creation or further mutation of numerous individuals, some of whom became part of the underground community of outcast mutants known as the Morlocks. I will note that the full scope of the Dark Beast's contribution to the Morlock population is somewhat unclear. He has claimed responsibility for their existence, specifically naming their leader Callisto as one of his creations. However, she and most others were apparently unaware of his existence, and the Morlocks did take naturally occurring mutants into their group as well. At some point, the Dark Beast encountered another former servant of Apocalypse from Reality 295, the grotesque Sugar Man. Having arrived on Earth 616 at around the same time, Sugar Man and the Dark Beast agreed to share information, but they didn't exactly get along, so their alliance didn't really go beyond that. Meanwhile, as the Age of Heroes dawned and events unfolded much differently than they had in the world he'd come from, the Dark Beast remained in the shadows and bided his time. Not wishing to revive their previous power dynamic, he took particular care to avoid being discovered by this reality's Mr. Sinister. Around this time, he came upon a young teenage mutant named Marshall Evan Stone, who had difficulty maintaining his physical form because of his body's malleable nature. McCoy helped Stone learn to control his abilities and stabilized his form, allowing the adolescent to bulk up, altering his appearance to resemble a muscular adult. Stone also gained the ability to form his arms into cannons capable of firing bursts of plasma energy. After that, Stone became a bounty hunter known as Random, but feeling indebted to the Dark Beast, agreed to serve him going forward, just as McCoy intended. At his command, Random allied himself with the government-sponsored mutant team X-Factor. Another agent who worked for the Dark Beast during this time was a teleporting mutant assassin named Fatal. Taking notice of the X-Man Bishop and concerned about what he knew about him from the other timeline, McCoy sent Fatal to spy on him under the false identity of Pamela Greenwood. To accomplish this, she became a waitress at a bar that the X-Men often frequented, Harry's Hideaway. For those curious about the overall timeline, it was after all of this that Legion went back and inadvertently created the Age of Apocalypse in the first place. Which means that, ironically, Bishop hadn't actually been to that reality and back until after the Dark Beast already started spying on him. Meanwhile, the Dark Beast and Sugar Man weren't the only refugees to escape from Earth 295. After catching back up to what at the time was considered the present, McCoy learned that Nathan Gray, aka X-Man, was also on Earth 616, and attempted to forge an alliance with him. While the two never actually met in their native reality, the Dark Beast recognized Nate as a creation of his old mentor, Mr. Sinister, and assumed that he would be able to manipulate him for his own ends. But having already turned against Sinister, the young mutant was far more independent than McCoy anticipated, and familiar with the Dark Beast's reputation, immediately rejected him. After that, the Dark Beast sent Random to lure X-Factor's leader, Alex Summers, aka Havok, into a trap. Random and Havok battled, but in the end, the Dark Beast's lackeys succeeded in abducting Alex. McCoy also realized that the bishop he'd been spying on was indeed the same one who'd spent time in the Age of Apocalypse, and ordered Fatale to eliminate him before any knowledge he gained from that reality could be used against him. However, Bishop was aided in the ensuing fight by McCoy's more heroic counterpart from that reality, the Beast. Seeing this bouncing blue variant of himself for the first time, the Dark Beast came up with a new plan to hide in plain sight. He began modifying himself, slowly altering his appearance to match that of his blue-furred doppelganger. He also visited friends and family from his counterpart's past, learning more about Hank McCoy's history in this timeline before covering his tracks by murdering almost anyone he met with. Although for all of his darkness, even this twisted version of McCoy found himself unable to murder his counterpart's parents, presumably because they were nearly identical to his own. After that, the Dark Beast lured the 616 Beast to the remains of his old workplace, the Brand Corporation. The two identical opponents fought, and while the local McCoy gained the upper hand over his sadistic counterpart, the Dark Beast tricked him into dropping his guard, simply by stating that if he killed him, he'd never find out where he came from. In the end, the Dark Beast locked his counterpart in the defunct Brand Corporation building, hiding him behind a brick wall and using his likeness to take over his life. The local beast begged his counterpart to continue his attempts to cure the mutant-killing legacy virus, even offering to work together, but the Dark Beast refused. Instead, the more sadistic McCoy studied and experimented on victims of the virus, creating a strain that was completely transmittable to baseline humans, and sealing carriers of the virus in underground tanks. The Dark Beast also infiltrated the X-Men and participated in several missions. However, his presence in the mansion was quickly detected by Onslaught, a malevolent psionic entity born from the negative emotions and dark urges of both Magneto and Charles Xavier combined. Motivated primarily by self-preservation, the Dark Beast agreed to join Onslaught and serve in his quest for global domination. During this time, the Dark Beast also attempted to mentally condition the captive Havok into turning against his former allies. In the ensuing battle with X-Factor, Random's allegiance to McCoy was exposed, the Earth 616 Beast was found and freed, and the Dark Beast was ultimately defeated and captured. Meanwhile, Havok broke free from the Dark Beast's mental conditioning, but was left disillusioned and angry by his experiences. Willing to go to more extreme lengths to maintain peace between humans and mutants, Havok decided to start his own Brotherhood and freed the Dark Beast from captivity, recruiting both him and Fatale. After that, McCoy secretly continued his experiments with the legacy virus and recruited Random to help him abduct more humans to use as test subjects, including an unhoused teenager named Mary Stewart. Meanwhile, Havok was working on a larger plan to find the Dark Beast's hidden underground labs and free any prisoners he might have already taken. Fortunately, another group of time travelers known as Xavier's Underground Enforcers, who came from the same alternate future as Bishop, prevented those infected with the modified legacy virus from being released into the world. That whole situation led to a battle in which Havok joined forces with XUE against the Dark Beast and Fatale, during which Random also turned against McCoy. In the end, while the Dark Beast escaped, Random volunteered to watch over the infected captives, and a cure for the virus was eventually found and distributed by the real McCoy. In the meantime, the Dark Beast went back into hiding, turning his attention back towards the Morlocks and other experiments. However, his new hiding spot was discovered by Nate Gray and Generation X, the latter of which was a mutant team led by his former ally Emma Frost. He escaped yet again, this time by using a sophisticated hard-light hologram as a decoy, and fled New York entirely. He subsequently relocated to the island of Genosha after it was mostly destroyed by Cassandra Nova's wild sentinels. There, he evidently took in one of the survivors, a teenage orphan known only as Wicked. She had the mutant power to summon and command the spirits of the dead, and ultimately joined forces with Xavier, Magneto, and Callisto in their efforts to rebuild the island. Meanwhile, seeking to loot the ruins and claim any valuables or technology for himself, the Dark Beast recruited a pirate named Strip Mine and a mutant appraiser named, Appraiser, as well as a trio of 4 armed Asgardian trolls to aid them as hired muscle. The Dark Beast and his lackeys were ultimately captured by Xavier and his allies, who at this point included Karima Shapandar, an Indian police officer who had been transformed into a cyborg Omega Sentinel, but rejected her murderous programming. Agreeing to help rebuild Genosha in exchange for their freedom, the Dark Beast led a group of human magistrates, formerly the country's special police force, on a mission to recover supplies from the Genoshan catacombs. However, this squad was ambushed by McCoy's erstwhile ally, the Sugar Man, and his servant Rastus, who killed the magistrates and badly injured the Dark Beast, before ultimately being defeated by Callisto and Omega Sentinel. After that, Xavier's dream of rebuilding Genosha was interrupted by the reality-warping incident known as the House of M, at the height of which a mentally unstable Scarlet Witch depowered the vast majority of Earth's mutant population. In the wake of this event, referred to as M-Day, the Dark Beast entered into an uneasy partnership with his 616 counterpart with the goal of restoring mutant kind. While searching for a solution, they delved into the darkest corners of the mutant world, including the defunct Black Womb facility in Alamogordo and the mass grave in the ruins of Genosha. In his investigations, the 616 McCoy determined that any mutants who originated from alternate timelines were unaffected, but this train of thought reached a dead end when the mutant inventor Forge revealed that since the events of M-Day, he was unable to detect any mutants within these divergent realities. Then, seeking to recreate the X gene from its essential building blocks, they visited Lucinda Guthrie, a human woman who had 10 children, half of which manifested mutant powers during puberty, a statistical anomaly. While there, the Dark Beast slipped away from his counterpart and injected the young and powerless Lewis Guthrie with necrotized DNA from a Genoshan tissue sample, causing a severe reaction that nearly killed him. Naturally, that marked the end of the partnership between the two beasts, as the 616 Hank turned on his dark counterpart, and the two fought until Lucinda fired on the Dark Beast, hitting him in the shoulder with birdshot. Escaping once again, the Dark Beast went back into hiding and performed back-alley medical procedures until he was found by Norman Osborn. This was during the Dark Reign, when the former industrialist was named the Director of National Security and the head of the International Peacekeeping Force, Hammer. Osborn recruited the Dark Beast and tasked him with building a device that could painlessly drain mutants of their energy, using them to fuel his power-absorbing agent, Michael Pointer, aka Weapon Omega. To this end, Osborn provided him with a lab and equipment on Alcatraz Island in the San Francisco Bay. However, Norman was less than thrilled to find out that the Omega machine was far more damaging to those it was used on than McCoy initially promised. While the Dark Beast delighted in torturing those he experimented on, including his local counterpart, his prisoners were ultimately freed by the mutant strike team X-Force. After that, McCoy became a more active member of Osborn's Dark X-Men alongside Omega, Mystique, and Mimic, and the team subsequently clashed with a nigh omnipotent Nathan Grey. When Osborn's reign inevitably came to an end, the Dark Beast escaped and went underground yet again. For his next experiment, he abducted Dr. Kurt Connors, aka the Lizard, who at the time had the power to generate brain waves that temporarily transformed others into reptilian servants. The Dark Beast attempted to study and replicate the Lizard's abilities, but in the end he was defeated by Spider-Man and the X-Men, and taken into custody for a second time. Ironically, he was soon freed by the members of X-Force, one of whom, Wolverine, was also on the team that captured him. During this time, the X-Force member Warren Worthington, aka the Angel, was losing control of his darker Archangel persona, a murderous alternate personality that was created by Apocalypse years prior. Desperate to help their teammate, the other X-Force members recruited the Dark Beast, who determined that because Apocalypse was thought to be dead at the time, Archangel was in the process of ascending to become his heir. He also explained that Apocalypse had implanted within the Angel something called a Death Seed, which could be counteracted by a celestial Life Seed. While a life seed was not likely to be created in Reality 616 for several centuries, the Dark Beast revealed that he had already obtained one in his native timeline, and thus the team used a dimensional portal to travel to the Age of Apocalypse. However, by the time they returned, the Dark Beast had betrayed X-Force and allied himself with the corrupted Archangel, the Final Horseman, and Apocalypse's biological son, Genocide. Stealing the Life Seed, Archangel and Dark Beast plotted to reset evolution across the entire planet. As a test run for this, they had Genocide wipe out a small town in Montana before using a portion of the Life Seed's energy, along with temporal manipulation technology from a sentient weapons facility known simply as the World, to create a self-contained alien ecosystem called Tabula Rasa, or Blank Slate. In the end, X-Force succeeded in stopping Archangel's plans and seemingly restored Warren to normal, albeit at the cost of his memories. The Dark Beast, meanwhile, ensured that the Horseman Pestilence escaped since she was pregnant with Archangel's child. She later gave birth to mutant twins, Uriel and Aemon, who were subsequently abducted by the time-traveling despot Kang the Conqueror and raised in the time stream where they grew up to become the duo known as the Apocalypse Twins. The Dark Beast, meanwhile, was captured and imprisoned once again, but this time he was freed by the Sugar Man, who wanted to return to their original timeline. But for what transpired there, you can check out the 2012 Age of Apocalypse series. McCoy subsequently returned to Earth 616, spent more time imprisoned, escaped again, continued to experiment on himself until he went too far and required a special containment suit to survive, and seemingly perished in yet another battle with the X-Men and his other self. He was then recovered by Mr. Sinister, who saved his head and transplanted it onto a new body. After that, the Dark Beast clashed with a team of Inhumans led by the former S.H.I.E.L.D. agent Daisy Johnson, aka Quake, but for that story you can read the 2017 Secret Warriors book. Meanwhile, after his resurrection at the hands of Mr. Sinister, the Dark Beast began embracing technological enhancements rather than genetic ones. During this time, he was recruited by the X-Men during one of the team's low points and forced to create a cure for the transmode virus, which had infected several of the new mutants. He discovered that the supposed virus was more like a parasite composed of pieces of their techno-organic alien ally, Warlock, and coaxed these pieces out of the New Mutants by having them infect one of the Multiple Man's dupes. The X-Men also tasked him with developing a countermeasure for a vaccine that would suppress the mutant X gene. However, when his solution to this had an adverse effect on some of those whose powers hadn't yet manifested, causing several children to fall into comas, the X-Men scrambled to fix what he'd done, and Illyana Rasputin used one of her stepping disc portals to decapitate the Dark Beast. This has proved to be the end of the twisted Dr. McCoy's machinations. However, his severed head was either recovered or cloned by Mr. Sinister, who stored it in his lab during the Krakoa era. While it's entirely possible that he will eventually return, if this is truly his ultimate fate, it's safe to say that his inclination to stay away from Sinister when he arrived on Earth 616 was the correct one, because this, for now at least, marks the end of the Dark Beast. But thank you so much for watching this video, and if you enjoyed it, be sure to leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and share it on your favorite social media. As always, the issues referenced in this video are listed in the description below if you would like to read them for yourself, as well as links to other places you can find me. Let me give a special shout out to all of my Patreon and Ko-fi supporters, Twitch subscribers, and YouTube members who help make the channel possible. By signing up for any ongoing amount on any of these platforms, you'll get your name in the special thanks, but Patreon is the one that helps determine what topics get covered on the channel via monthly polls. That said, if there's anything in particular that you want me to talk about, be sure to let me know in the comments. But that is indeed all I have for you this week, and so until next time, true believers, Excelsior!